Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 91, Friday, June 23rd, 2023.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Toad, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined as always by the mole to my rat, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Thanks, Courtney. Welcome back, listeners. We are merrily on our way to discussing a Wind in the Willows episode, which is not complete with our very own Mr. Toad.
Yes, joining us once again is Conor Perkins of Poor Unfortunate Podcast. Conor and his co-host Caroline joined us on episode 58 to discuss The Great Mouse Detective, Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus. Since then, he has landed a recurring role in NBC's Chicago Med, so I lifted the following bio from his IMDb now that he's so fancy. Conor Perkins is a New York-based actor born in Baltimore, Maryland, and raised in the suburbs among steamed crabs, cornfields, and Wawa. Conor started his career doing musicals and plays with his high school and local community theaters. In 2011, he attended New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, where he trained with the prestigious Atlantic Acting School. He graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drama in 2015. Since then, he has continued working in both film and TV in addition to the theater, recurring as Dr. Zach Hudgens in NBC's Chicago Med. In the spring of 2020, he launched his own bi-weekly podcast with longtime friend and actor Caroline Emily, entitled Poor Unfortunate Podcast, a comedic millennial take on all things Disney. So welcome back, Conor.
Thank you so much for having me, and I apologize that you had to read all of that.
I loved it.
But I am so grateful that I got to be introduced as your Mr. Toad. That is like an honor among all honors. So thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here.
I want to comment that I'm really happy you have Wawa in your IMDb
I have to.
bio. I appreciate that.
I had a Wawa sub for dinner.
Literally all around me are like Wawa iced tea bottles, but you can't see them.
Very nice.
Because I put them on the ground.
So Conor, we're really excited to have you back. And the last time you were with us on Book of the Mouse Club, you and I hardcore geeked out about The Great Mouse Detective's original source material, Basil of Baker Street. But when we reached out to you about this summer series, you were equally as excited to talk about The Wind in the Willows and Disney's Mr. Toad. So I want to know, why do you love this Motorcar Mania amphibian so much?
Oh my gosh, that is like a lot to unpack. I think it probably has to do with the fact that there's just like no one else like Mr. Toad. He is a wholly original character, and he's like a queen. Like he's a perfect like queer icon, just like living his life. He's everything that you would want to be. I mean, minus, going to jail. But I mean, like he's just wholly original. No, like you'd never think a toad would be the most fabulous character in this book, but here we are. He's the most fabulous character.
He truly is the most fabulous. So let's dive into that book. Emily, of course, has a little bit of background on The Wind in the Willows and its author. I will turn it over to you, Emily.
Of course, I'm going to cite my sources first, as a true teacher should. So I referenced quite a few. First and foremost, I used the introduction by Gardner McFall from the Barnes & Noble Classics version of The Wind in the Willows. I've talked about those Barnes & Noble Classics a lot. I love those editions. Bodleian Libraries exhibit, Britannica.com, BritishLibrary.cn, CountryLife.co.uk, and dare I say, I did dabble a little bit in Wikipedia. So Kenneth Grahame is our author. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1859 and lived his childhood in the countryside in Cookham Den, Berkshire. as setting which would influence much of his writing. In a way, this reminds me a lot of Walt and Marceline, how his childhood upbringing is going to influence him a lot. To cope with the death of his mother, Grahame turned to nature and found solace and wonder in animals and landscapes. After school, Grahame took a job with the Bank of England in London in 1879. Outside of work, he continued to pursue his literary passions and published several books in the late 1890s. Pagan Papers in 1894, The Golden Age in 1895, which is a collection of children's stories, and then another collection of children's stories called Dream Days was published in 1889. And this also includes a story that may be familiar to some Disney enthusiasts called The Reluctant Dragon. And finally, The Headswoman was published in 1898 as well. With royalties from his books, Grahame decided to leave the bank and live full-time with his wife and son back in Cookham Dean, Berkshire, and his childhood home. While on a long holiday with his wife around Cornwall in 1907, Grahame told his son Alistair stories through letters that he sent home, inspired by the vast, beautiful English countryside and its juxtaposition with the Industrial Revolution taking place in the cities. In 15 letters, Grahame told the story of the reckless adventurers, the attempts of his long-suffering friends, Mole, Rat, and Badger, to rescue him from his various scrapes and teach him how to behave properly. The letters were saved by Alistair's nanny, Miss Scott, who then gave them to Grahame's wife, Elspeth, who convinced Grahame to turn the stories into a book. The Wind in the Willows, Grahame's only full-length fiction, was rejected numerous times before being picked up by UK publisher Muthen & Company in 1908 and later in US by Scribner. Many critics who admire his early works were disappointed by The Wind in the Willows, but the public loved it. Some celebrity praise included U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, who wrote to Grahame saying he had, quote, read it and reread it and have come to accept the characters as old friends, end quote. English writer A.A. Milne, who would author Winnie the Pooh later in 1926, would extract Toad's adventures and turn them into a play called Toad of Toad Hall in 1929. Another admirer was C.S. Lewis, author of The Chronicles of Narnia, who praised Grahame's ability for explaining things without really explaining them. For example, C.S. Lewis said of Mr. Badger, quote, that the extraordinary amalgam of high rank, coarse manners, gruffness, shyness, and goodness, the dills which he once met, Mr. Badger has ever afterwards in his bones a knowledge of humanity and of English social history which he could not get in any other way, end quote. The impact of The Wind in the Willows on children's literature is that it is the first novel-length animal fantasy with roots in Aesop's fables and tales of Peter Rabbit. Gardner McFall, who wrote the introductory essay to the Barnes Noble classic, claimed that without The Wind in the Willows, we do not get stories like Winnie the Pooh, Stuart Little, Charlotte's Web, or Frog and Toad Are Friends. Considered one of the greatest works of children's literature of all time, it has been adapted several times to stage and screen, and there are at least 10 different illustrated versions of the story. The most popular illustrated version is Ernest H. Shepard's from 1931. Grahame died in 1932 and bequeathed all the royalties to his works to the University of Oxford for the benefit of the Bodleian Library. The original letters Grahame sent to Alistair were gifted to that library by his wife in 1943 and can still be read there today.
Thank you. I definitely got Frog and Toad vibes, so I love that the introduction called that out.
Yeah, all of those things, Winnie the Pooh, Stuart Little, Charlotte's Web, Frog and Toad, I'm like, yes, we wouldn't have gotten them.
Yeah, so that scholar sheet credited that Peter Rabbit does come before The Wind in the Willows, but Peter Rabbit's more of a short story or a collection of short stories of minor adventures. This is the first that this Gardner McFall, a children's author as well as PhD in children's literature, talked about how this is the first full-length fiction where all of the stories are connected. So even though we'll talk about this, we go back and forth between multiple characters, but they're all intertwined. And that's a first for children's literature at this point, which is pretty interesting. So going into this, what is everyone's experience with the source material? Have we read this before? Did anyone know of the story outside of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disney?
That's definitely how I learned about it, was the Disney connection. But I knew about it at a relatively young age, like I'd say maybe 5th to 7th grade. I'm going to reveal my toxic trait here, and that is that I have this fear that if I don't buy a book in an independent bookstore, it's going to go out of business, and that dates back to my childhood. So anytime I go to one, I walk out with a book, and I do remember being in middle school and buying a copy of The Wind in the Willows, but I absolutely never read it until earlier this week. I was not working off the same copy Lord knows what happened to that. But I was like, wow, that is a consistent theme in my life. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy this random book. And now I have a really big to be read pile. And that is probably why we have this podcast, so that I do keep reading. So I had heard of it. I was aware from, I'd say, a relatively young age, but had not read it until 2 days ago. So here we are.
I was very aware of The Wind in the Willows as a child. It was one of my dad's books that he had. I literally have his Scribner's copy of The Wind in the Willows. That's what I read for this out of, with all of Ernest Shepard's illustrations, the color ones too. I have multiple copies of this book. I read it when I was a kid. I watched, there was a 1995 animated, I think it was through ITV, feature of The Wind in the Willows that my grandmother had, and like Vanessa Redgrave was the narrator in it, and Michael Gambon was in it, and Michael Palin, and it was just lives rent free in my brain all the time. So I knew about The Wind in the Willows before I actually saw the Disney version, to the point where when I got to the Disney version, we'll probably talk about this later, I was like, wait, this isn't the story that I was remembering. So, yeah, no, I am very familiar with this material, and it is, dare I say, more of a classic to me personally than Winnie the Pooh. Like, we have, like, I have, as a kid, I had like hard copies of the Winnie the Pooh books, but then we also had the hard copy of The Wind in the Willows, and The Wind in the Willows was sort of like the mythology that I attached myself to more so than Winnie the Pooh.
I find this so interesting because from stuff that I was reading, it's a story that seems to be, even though it's considered one of the greatest children's books of all time, there's like a divide. People either know it and love it or don't know it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm in the house of, I only knew it through Disney. So I bought my copy of the book, actually, Courtney, when you and I started our podcast, and I was in I think it's when I was buying our copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales and Hans Christian Andersen's stories so that we could do our fairy tale favorites. And I was just in the Barnes & Noble Classics section. I was like pulling whatever books. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to probably talk about The Wind in the Willows at some point. So I
took
bought
us 5 years, but
it took us 5
are.
years to get there, but we made it.
5 years later, and here we are.
So that's where I got mine. My copy, I'm glad you have the Scribner copy. I was hoping that the illustrations in the Barnes & Noble one were also Ernest Shepard, but they are Nancy Barnhart's. So I'll have to look
she does
up.
a wonderful job. The Scribner one is really cool. Like, here, I'm going to just show, I know none of you are going to be able to see this, but like it opens with like a
there's
full
a map.
on.
See,
Yeah,
okay. I would love this more if I had a map.
Yeah,
I'm all about
has
book
the
maps.
map, and it's literally it's Shepard's handwriting, so it looks exactly like the 100 Acre Wood, and like there are just the illustrations are just beautiful. There's black and white, and then this edition has like color ones too.
Yours has a lot more illustrations than mine.
It has tons of illustrations.
Oh, look at that. I wonder if that would have helped, but yeah. So my familiarity is purely from. I'm pretty sure I rode the attraction first before I ever watched Mr. Toad. I know it's a package film with Ichabod, and that one I know I watched a lot as a kid, but I wonder if at some point I just like stopped the VHS or something, because I have a lot more vivid memories of Ichabod than I do of watching Mr. Toad. But I know I watched it, but I'm pretty sure I attach myself more to the attraction than I do to the animated film came later to me, and then now it's my first time reading the book.
Well, what were all of our initial thoughts on the book?
I mean, I just love it. This is, oh my gosh. I was like sitting on this little like chaise longue in this room that I'm in, looking out the window, reading this, and I was just like, this is everything. I was sitting outside and reading it like under a tree, and it is just like a connection to childhood and a connection to nature for me, that it's like when on my podcast I talked about Winnie the Pooh, and I talked about Winnie the Pooh sort of like being like a deep sigh, and this feels like that as well. It feels like that deep sigh where you can just relax. You can ruminate on some of the complexities and the simplicities of life, but you only have to go as far as you want with it. So yeah, no, my initial thoughts are I freaking love this book. I always will. I always will.
I feel like you took your acting skill, method acting. It's an outdoor book. You had to read it outside under a tree. I did.
And then when it was raining, and then I went inside, and when it was raining was also when I was like dealing with Toad going to prison, and I was like, oh yes, I'm in the mood, and the gray skies for when we're in the wild wood. Yeah, no. I've immersed myself in this book.
So I'm really glad I read this book. I love going back and reading classics, and I know I talk about this all the time on our show, but I find it really interesting, especially to read original source material for things that we watch and see all the time that are adapted. So I'm really glad I read it. It was a slow start for me. Definitely Toad's chapters are my favorite chapters. He really has a much more compelling, moving character. It's a little bit more fast-paced, boop, boop. Drive the car. But getting started with Mole and Rat, it took me a little bit of time to get in the groove with them because they do take things a little bit slower. They appreciate their nature. So it took me a bit to understand how they fit with Toad's story. And then when we get about halfway through and all of their storylines come together, I was much more invested. But it is beautiful writing. He writes about nature like it's poetry without writing in a poetic format. So beautiful writing, a little bit of a slow start for me, but I did get into it by the time Toad is thrown in prison for sure.
I like when we go back to children's literature like this. I feel like I made a similar comment out on the Winnie the Pooh episode for sure, but I have this really fond memory of being a kid. Maybe, I was old enough that I could probably read for myself. And when I say a bedtime story, it's not like we were looking at a picture book, but I remember my dad, I was probably 7 or 8, reading me Stuart Little. And I was at my dad's house on the weekend, so it took us like a few weeks to get through that. But we would just do like one chapter at a time because they were these nice little vignettes that were easy stopping points and then pick back up. So whenever we read something like this, it takes me back to that moment. So while The Wind in the Willows wasn't something that was read to me as a kid, I can definitely see how this would lend itself to moments like that. So I'd encourage anyone who does have kids and is interested in this book to practice that and just, maybe do a little chapter before bedtime because it would really lend itself to something like that.
Oh, so good. So good. I love me an anthropomorphic animal story. It's just, that's where I live. So speaking of anthropomorphic animals, let's talk favorite characters. What are the favorite characters? What are the least favorite characters?
Favorite for me, I think, is going to be Toad. Even though he's a complex and he's a complex character. He's got some flaws. I think he's just the most fun to read. His dialogue is so funny. Because he is definitely a character, from a lot of things I was reading, he's described as being in the extremes. He's either extremely happy and excited, or he's extremely sad and feels like the entire world is against him. So going back and forth between those two is really fun to read. Mole kind of grew on me by the end. Mole, he has this heroic moment where he helps save Toad Hall, and I thought he had a good character arc of, he comes out of his hole and decides he's not just going to live underground his whole life. He's going to have some adventure tempered with a good home life as well. He finds balance, but I thought he had a good story. Least favorite? I don't know if I necessarily have a least. There's none that I was like, ugh, I don't dislike any one character. I think I liked the water rat more. Like the more I read him, like he's got quite a voice of reason. I don't know about any least characters. Maybe the weasels. I was hoping they had some more fight in them at the end. It seemed so easy to get rid of them. I was a little...
Well, and then you got the one that's like, oh, I'm going to try and make it right. And I'm going to come back and like, can I do any favors for you? I'm like, come on, you're going to be a bad guy.
I think I'm a little disappointed in our villains that, they need Ratigan to like...
Where is Ratigan?
He would have fit right in.
Oh, he would have. He would have raised hell. Actually, he would have been living in Toad Hall. Let's be real.
Oh, yeah. I would say I'm a Mole girly. I love Mole. I think that's part of because I just think Mole is so adorable in the animated Disney short, but he only has like 2 lines. He doesn't speak to like the last 10 minutes. But he's just so adorable. So I was delighted that we start off our journey reading with Mole, and I would say Mole is a much bigger protagonist than he is in the
absolutely.
film. You're mostly following Mole's journey up until Mr. Toad is introduced, and then even then it goes back and forth between the chapters. But I found him so lovable, so loyal. I just wanted to like make tea and eat biscuits or something with him in a cozy little burrow hole. Though my least favorite, he was only in one chapter, but I think he was referred to as the sea rat, like the water rat's counterpart.
The sea rat.
I was just like, what is this? We don't need this. I could have done without that chapter.
My favorite character. So as a kid, I always gravitated towards Mole. He was just like everything to me. I think because there was like a very shy side to myself that I resonated with Mole, with this sort of like shy homebody, but also thirsting for adventure, but like how much adventure can he actually handle? It just felt very, very me. As I've gotten older, I just love Mr. Toad so much, because I think for the same reasons as you, Emily, of like he just swings to the extremes. Like as an actor, for me, that is so interesting and so inviting to me, because you can just like do so much with it. So I would have to say that like they're still my two favorites. But this read in particular, the water rat really he really hit me. And ironically, the chapter that you hated, Courtney, that was the one that like just like got its hooks in me. And maybe it's because I'm living at home right now and I'm away from like the city and everything, and just like the sort of like yearning for something outside, like someone who has never thought of looking outside his own backyard, suddenly feeling that call. Whew, that really got me. I do not think that I have a least favorite character in this. I would probably just say the rabbits, because they're just kind of buttholes and they have no backbone, and they're like private road, and then Mole's like onion sauce and he just plows right through. And so the rabbits are my least favorites. So, and you know what? It's time that rabbits got put down a few pegs. Everyone thinks that they're so cute, and now we're putting them in their place.
Yeah, in this book, definitely the upper rodents will be a water rat, a badger, and a mole. They are top tier rodents for this story. I want to talk a little bit more about Toad as a character, because this is obviously the character that Disney's going to focus on. This is the character that pulls most people into this. But would we argue, I'm not going to use hero or villain, because this is not quite a hero and villain story, but is Toad a good guy? Is Toad a bad guy? Like, what do we think of Toad?
Can I just say that Toad is a manic guy, and that's neither good nor bad? He's definitely more complex than the Disney film makes him out to be, because the situation surrounding the motorcar is a bit different. I feel like Disney tries to reconcile for him, like, oh, he didn't steal it, he just, they lied. Mr. Winky, who's not in the book, lied under oath, and he just accidentally, signed it away. That's what happened. But in here, he just straight up steals the car, and I was like, whoa, hold on a moment, Toad, what are you doing? Disney tries to absolve him of that for sure.
Yeah, I see. I don't think that Toad is a bad guy. I think he is kind of like our Taylor Swift anti-hero in this scenario, where a lot of the conflict arises from him, but not from any sort of malintent, but from him not sort of being able to control his instincts, which I think is very interesting. Then placing this with animals as the story of the sort of like fight against instinct, fight against like the sort of animal self versus the more like enlightened self. And like we see this in the Wild Wood when the weasels are like after Mole, but then we see them when they're like not sort of taken by that. So I wouldn't say that Toad is a bad guy, but yeah, Disney 100% tries to make him better than what he is. He does steal. He performs for the gods. So yeah, but you can't help but love him. he means so well. So
He's
I
the
don't-
most
yeah, I
entertaining
don't know.
part of it, for sure.
He's-
We need those actions to...
He's a good guy who makes wrong decisions.
I like
and it's
that.
nice to know that that those types of people can exist. That like as a kid hearing this story, you could be like, I can still be a good person even when I make the bad choice. There is a path to redemption. I think that's nice to know as a kid.
I'd agree. Like, I don't think he's good or bad. The mania is definitely there. And that is what makes him fun. But why I was thinking about good character, bad character is the last chapter when they save Toad Hall and he's redeemed, in a sense, his friends, which we're going to talk about, Badger, Mole, and Rat as a friend group. But they kind of get him to, I think they even use the word, he's a reformed toad. Like they throw this banquet of them taking back Toad Hall and welcoming him home from his scrapes and adventures. And they tell him, like, you're not allowed to give a speech. You're not allowed to sing a song about yourself. Like, they're really trying to humble him a little bit. And then he successfully makes it through the evening, being modest about his role. He didn't overplay that he really wasn't the leader of taking back Toad Hall. That was all Badger and Mole. Whereas, by the way, the Rat having like a full-on armory in his house.
Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite scenes where he's just like, all right, a gun for Mole, a gun for you, a gun for you, a gun for you, a cutlass for you, a cutlass for you.
Like, where does Rat?
So good. And when they're like, and when Badger's like, I actually don't need that. You just give me a good stick and I can just beat the crap out of anyone. And Ratty's like, no, we're gonna go in prepared with our guns. And I was like, holy crap.
So concerned. I was like, wait a minute, we're all going on about Toad's mania and the menace he is to society, but all three of you just suddenly became very violent out of nowhere in this wild wood. I guess the wood teaches you some things living in the wilderness.
They were ready to stick up for their friends. So let's ruminate on that a bit. Would you say that Badger, Mole, and Rat are good friends to Toad?
I think that they are. I think that they do always have his best intent. Like, they always have good intentions, and they're always, I think, looking out for Toad. I do think some of the things that they do in retrospect, like maybe they weren't that wasn't the right way to go about it, but I think that's what I really respond to in this story is that, like, everyone's just sort of like trying their best, and sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not great, but it's always sort of coming from a good place. It's coming from like a place of heart. And I really love in that sort of last chapter when they're talking about like the banquet and everything, and when Badger and Rat are talking to each other about whether or not they were too harsh on Toad, on not letting him do the speech, and how it's hard on them to put that on Toad, but they know that they've got to be strong for him, and then he succeeds. So it's like, I think that they are good friends. But one of my favorite things ever is just like when Badger is hibernating and he's like, I can't deal with this until I'm ready to go. And then like 6 months goes by, Rat and Mole are just chilling at home, and it's like knock, knock, knock at the door. And Badger's like, all right, today's the day. We're going to do an intervention. That I find absolutely hysterical. I think it's so good. But I think they're good friends. They do an intervention and it's not successful, but then they don't give up. They try and they don't give up on him. Even when he escapes from jail and shows up at their door, they're like, okay, how do we make this right? Clearly jail is not teaching him the lesson he needs to learn here. So how else can he learn this lesson? And I think he does sort of learn the lesson by the end, when he has to sit at the back of the line as they're going through the tunnel, and then he loses privileges and then has to go in front of Rat and all that stuff. So that's just like my 2 cents.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think in the long run, they are good friends because they're kind of the friends that we all wish we had, but we all know that in the moment, when your friend is telling you the truth, the hard truth, we're all going to react like Toad and be a little defensive and a little like taken aback. But then you're like, thank you, I needed that. So I think they're really good friends in that respect. Mole and Badger lives Toad Hall trying to keep it safe while Toad is away for 20 years. They're committing themselves to upkeeping this estate for 20 years while he's in prison. Then they get run out by the weasels. But they tried. And then they take it back. But yeah, they stand by their friends. Rat has quite a few heart-to-heart. I think Rat's heart-to-heart with Toad when he escapes from prison, after the train, after the barge woman, we're in the river. There's a lot to get back to Toad Hall. I think his heart-to-heart hit home more than Badger's, where Rat was like, think of your friends, think of me, Mole, Badger, everything we've gone through to defend you, and you keep dragging us through the mud. They're like, we're getting shut out by the rest of the Wildwood Society because we keep sticking up for you, even though you keep damaging other people's property with your newest obsessions, even though you break laws. Like, think of us. I think his hit a little bit harder to Toad than I think Badger's did. We start to see Toad having to step back a little bit, but I did, I kind of went full on high school mode here, and I did turn to SparkNotes online to look at some of their analysis. And there is some analysis out there where I think overall people agree they're good friends, but there is some sense of moral superiority that they have over Toad. Which when we talk about themes, I think this will come back, that I think as a writer, Grahame does hold Badger, Mole, and Rat higher than Toad. And because it is their job to kind of be the foils to Toad. So I think there's a little to be questioned here that sometimes, like, I think they could have helped Toad maybe a little nicer in some regards, but maybe Toad needed that tough love.
Yeah, see, I think it was a realistic friend group. They're very loyal to their friend, as evidenced by the fact that they're willing to, help him with his house, even when he's away in jail. But I feel that real friends are always going to tell you like it is. Like, you need someone to tell you if you have spinach in your teeth or if you're being an absolute jerk. And those are the type of friends that he has. So I liked their friend group.
Yeah, I do too. And I feel like there's a lot of tropes that are represented in the characters too. And it's sort of like everyone sort of comes as they are. Like, I think of like when Badger stops by like the picnic and is like there for like a hot second and is like, and then leaves, and Ratty's like, that's just him. He'll come back when he's ready, like that sort of thing. I like that as a part of their friend group. But thinking about the ending, is our boy Toad reformed? Should he have gone back to jail? Or was he right in being busted out of jail and then everyone just like straight up not turning him back in and just being okay with it?
So that's what floored me the most. I was like, for Mole and Rat and Badger, who, again, we're going to talk about themes, about upholding society and honesty. I was really surprised that people weren't like, dude, you broke out of prison and broke way more laws since than stealing a car. Now, granted, I agree that 20 years for stealing a car that ultimately got back to the people was a little much. And they talk about in the book how there's like a divide in the wood of people who say that Toad was wronged and those who said that 20 years was worth it. But that floored me so much. They're just like, and he's home. And it's like, this banquet's not quiet. Like, people know that he's back. I was like, is he gonna like return home and maybe try to live out that 20 years and no one knows that he left or where he is? But no, everyone knows he's back. And I was just like, we're okay with this? Okay. I think there is some reform there. I think he went through a lot of hardships. I think he's going to need a little bit more heart-to-hearts. He survived that banquet without bragging about stealing a horse, conning a barge woman, getting through a train race. He was a little humble and recognizing that maybe those are not things I should brag about or should have done. I don't know if he's fully reformed, but I think he's on a path.
Yeah, I feel like you do notice an improvement, but who's to say how long it'll last? I feel the Disney film somewhat suggests that very overtly, maybe with its ending of, he's like, oh yeah, I'll never do that again, and then he gets a plane. There was no plane at the end of the book here, but I would not be surprised if he returns to his toady ways.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's on a path. Like, I see a lot of like an allegory towards addiction in Toad with his manias and things like that, and that he's always going to be in recovery for it, and it's always going to be a path. He's never going to be fully healed from it. And I don't know. I'm going to kind of stick up and be like, I don't think he was learning his lesson in jail. So jail was never going to really work for him. And also, like, we're the humans that put a toad in jail for 20 years. I'm like, if a toad steals your motor car, maybe you deserve to go to jail because you let a toad steal your car. And then those people have the audacity to get tricked by Toad again and drive their car with them in it. So I think, like, Toad's fine. He will learn his lesson outside of jail. That's my belief.
So speaking of lessons, most children's stories and fairy tales are known for those morals and cautionary tales. What are the themes that we picked up in The Wind in the Willows? Things that we should take away of why we keep reading this to children?
I don't know that I took an immediate lesson, but definitely a theme that I saw throughout was the idea of home. Not only Toad reclaiming his own ancestral home of Toad Hall, but each of our animals, we get to explore our main characters' homes. Mole goes to live with Rat for a bit, but then literally hears the call, or I guess smells the call of his original burrow, and they go back and visit there, and we get a little time with badgers. So I liked the idea of home and the comforts that home provides.
Yeah, I mean, home is such a part of this story. I also think adventure is a part of this story as well, and like just what adventure means. Is it storming Toad Hall and beating up a bunch of weasels and stoats, or is adventure walking out your front door? I think that's a big part of it. I think there's also the sort of like the theme of a call outside of yourself, something happening outside of you. Like I think of when they go to the island and they see Pan and the sort of like otherworldly, celestial, godlike being, and the like of there's this theme of coming outside of yourself in this as well, both literally and metaphorically. So that's usually like when I return to it, I come back for the call and for home.
I like those a lot. I'll admit I was a little influenced by the research I did. So I actually wrote most of my background intro before I read the book. And I read the introduction and the essay by Gardner McFall in my book before I read the story. So I was influenced a little bit by scholarship. And a lot of what people were writing about is how Grahame, there is this juxtaposition, like Toad is influenced by progress. He is excited. First, we see about the cart and the horse. Transportation is his big thing, and that's what's really building in the Industrial Revolution of the 1870s through the early 1900s. Motor cars. Disney, we get the plane in the 1920s. So there's this juxtaposition of the English countryside that Grahame loves so much. He grew up there after his mother's passing. He moves to London, and then he purposely moves back to the countryside to get once he can sustain himself on his writing, to get away from the bank, to get away from London, because he finds that solace and healing through nature. And we can see that, I think, like he would be a mole, rat, and badger. That's Grahame, of how much he wants to preserve his home. And I think I like what you said about home, and they're talking about how like the wild wood and their home is worth protecting. And maybe that's why they're so hard on Toad, because what Toad is getting gravitated towards keeps not destroying, but he destroys other people's property by running cars around it.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of destructive.
He's a little destructive. So I think they want to protect their home from those things, and that you can have a beautiful life. Like that chapter that spoke to you, you said, Connor, that eventually Mole kind of gets Rat to stay, which is interesting, where I feel like most of the time we see stories now where we would have encouraged Water Rat to go with Sea Rat. Like, you can always come home, but go have that adventure.
Yeah.
But Mole reminds him how much he loves his river, how much this home means to him, and he stays. So a lot of the themes that I was getting from the scholarship is this juxtaposition of preserving home, preserving the country, while this new industrial revolution and new modern technology, transportation is starting to build up and take over. And I think that's where we see that Toad has to reconcile with finding that balance between the two. Now, granted, I like yours a lot better. I think that's what's going to speak to children, is having an adventure. An adventure can look different to everyone. But like you said at the top of the episode, this story is really complex if you really take the time to study it like some of these scholars have. And if you didn't know that about Grahame, I probably would not have been looking for those themes that these scholars keep talking about. So that is a very brief discussion we had about the book. I know we're going to keep talking about this as we compare now to the animated shorts and then into the Walt Disney World and Disneyland attractions. But Courtney, can you give some background on the animated short before we continue?
Sure. I have, of course, turned to our trusted resource, Disney A to Z. Now, the primary entry is for the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, but I have pared it down to only the Mr. Toad portion since we did cover Ichabod in our 2018 Legend of Sleepy Hollow episode. So I'm not going to do a little quote, then I'm just going to go into it because it's my edited version. But Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad film. The film begins in a library with actor Basil Rathbone telling the tale of The Wind in the Willows from the book by Kenneth Grahame about Mr. Toad, Squire of Toad Hall, whose love for transportation vehicles was insatiable. His friends Rat, Mole, and Mech Badger try to help him when his mania leads to the loss of the deed of Toad Hall and a charge of car theft. Toad is thrown in jail, but on escaping, he learns Winky, the tavern keeper, and the Weasels have taken over Toad Hall, and with his friends, Toad redeems his good name by recovering the deed to the estate and promises to reform until he eyes a 1908 biplane. Released October 5th, 1949, directed by Jack Kinney, Clyde Jerome, and James Alger, 68 minutes. Voices in the Mr. Toad segment include Eric Bohr as Toad, J. Pat O'Malley as Cyril, his horse, and Claude Allister and Colin Campbell as his friends Rat and Mole. This was the last of several package films of the 1940s, during which the Walt Disney Studio had deep economic problems. Expenses were lowered by reusing animation cycles from The Old Mill, 1937. Henceforth, Walt Disney would be able to finance the production of regular one-story animated features beginning the next year with Cinderella. Its success ensured the continuation of the animation at the studio. The entire film of The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad was not initially released on video cassette, but the two parts were released separately. The complete feature was released on Laserdisc in 1992 and on video in 1999. That was the end of the entry, but they have been separated, as mentioned there, because I also found entries for the Madcap Adventures of Mr. Toad, which was the theatrical reissue of that Wind in the Willows segment, on December 25th, 1975. As well as The Adventures of J. Thaddeus Toad. This was the educational title of the featurette, originally released theatrically as The Madcap Adventures of Mr. Toad, and Wind in the Willows, released in September 1980. So they've given it different titles over the years, separated it from Ichabod, though it still remains at its 32-minute runtime. Doing some additional resource outside of Disney A to Z, I found that, like most package films, this was originally pitched as a feature-length film. The film was actually pitched in 1938, shortly after the release of Snow White, and the studio was able to secure the rights in the same year. Work on the film began in 1941, but it was shelved due to the animator strike, then of course followed by the United States involvement in World War II. Production resumed in 1946, but then it was deemed to pair as a package film within the next year. So they were actively working on it as a feature up until about 2 years before its release, at which point they decided to pare it down, and we got The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So thoughts or memories on this animated short, or those two together as a whole?
Yeah, so I saw the animated Disney version after I had seen this other animated version that came out in 1995. And that was basically just did the story. And so when I saw this, I was like, I was very jarred having seen Disney's version because it was so Toad centric, and the book is very like Mole and Ratty centric. And so that just like threw me for a loop, but also helped me fall in love with Mr. Toad so much because just really, if you want to pare this down as they did, you want to take Mr. Toad's story because it's the most exciting. It has all of the great elements that are going to work so well in a cartoon that Disney was making at the time. But no, I loved it. I have a lot of very, very fond memories. My dad is a huge fan of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So this paired perfectly for us because I would be like, yep, I'm going to watch it for Wind in the Willows. My dad's like, great, I'm sticking around for Ichabod. And so the two of them are always sort of like living together for me and for my family. So, but yeah, lots of fond memories.
I do remember watching this. I remember I have The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad both on VHS and also on DVD.
No Laserdisc?
It is not the Laserdisc. I think later when my family was transitioning to we need to buy it, all of the Disney movies a second time in DVD versus VHS, we got it at some point. I'm actually at my parents' house. I could go look for it. So I remember watching it not regularly. I really think what sticks out to me is I'm pretty sure that Merrily on Our Way was in a sing-along song. And that's what sticks out to me the most from The Adventures of Mr. Toad is that song. Because even though I do know the short, I have watched it a few times. I think normally I was like your dad who I stuck mostly for Sleepy Hollow, but it's not one I regularly reached for. And I really think I just remember mostly watching the song on a sing-along song. I hope I'm right in remembering it's in a sing-along song somewhere. I always thought it was fun how they rhyme all the shires together.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a sing-along song.
I surprisingly have no childhood memories of this film, but it has become a staple in our home in adulthood. So, doing my research, I was like, why didn't we own this one? And I feel like I have a theory related to the timeline. So, we were all children of the 90s, but this was a late VHS release, with it being 1999. And I can picture probably on the VHS for Mulan or something. Like, I do remember seeing a trailer, like, coming soon for the first time on video cassette. Ichabod and Mr. Toad. We just didn't buy that one, and I feel like that was maybe, I don't know, like, not to get like too deep or depressing. By 1999, my parents were split, so I feel like we weren't actively collecting in either household, but early on, like, all of the classics of my mom's childhood were being reissued. Like, my mom loves Cinderella, that's her favorite, so of course we had that, but this would be too early for my mom to have a memory of, and it looks like it wasn't really often brought back to theaters in that 7-year cycle, like we've seen for other classics like Snow White. So we just did not own this one. I of course knew that the character existed, which we'll get into our memories of the attraction because it is very tied to that, but we did get this picked up probably about 10 years ago, maybe 8 or so. My now husband and I started to collect all the Disney movies. Like, we want to own them all on Blu-ray and have the digital copies. This is pre-Disney Plus. So this is one that is in rotation a lot. We have an Apple TV. They're all queued up in there. So, like, bedtime, we're putting on something with music to fall asleep. And the fun thing about Mr. Toad and Ichabod is I consider them both seasonal little features because there is a Christmas scene, or Christmas/New Year's in Mr. Toad, and of course Ichabod is very Halloween, so that is definitely in heavy rotation for bedtime between October and December for us. So I have discovered a love for it now within the past decade or so, regularly watching it. So I was like, I didn't have it as a kid on VHS, so I feel like that really influences what we remember or become attached to, but I'm so glad to have now grown an affinity for it in recent years.
Yeah, I distinctly remember when we got the VHS of it because we had a taped from TV version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And when they finally released the package of the two of them together, my dad was like, oh, thank God. Now we can get like an actual, not like a recorded from TV version.
Commercials.
And so, exactly. So we got that, and we had Mr. Toad and Ichabod. And then we also got, when they released all of the like Americana shorts with like Pecos Bill and Johnny Appleseed and all of them all together. We got those at the same time. But anyway, let's talk about how this movie, how this short upholds the integrity of the story. Any major differences? Hopefully there are some major differences that you see.
You weren't paying attention.
So many. So I think on a surface you would want to say yes, because we have the main storyline of Toad and the motor car. He goes to jail, he breaks out of jail. So I think at a surface level people would say yes, but after reading this, I'm going to argue no, it does not uphold the integrity, because I think we lose all of those themes that we just talked about, the idea of preserving your home and loving your home, pushing yourself in different types of adventure. And in the end of the Disney short, I think what makes it funny is that Toad doesn't learn his lesson, but that's not what Grahame wrote. He does learn a lesson, and all of that gets lost in the Disney short, which I still think is really fun to watch. We'll talk about those big differences. I'm sure someone's going to bring it up with Mr. Winky and how...
I want dibs on Mr. Winky.
Okay, and how this all goes down. But overall, I think it's very surface level. This is an instance where Disney did not keep the story.
I was shook that there was no Mr. Winky. So former guest of the podcast, now husband Doug, takes a very active interest, in my reading, and will often watch the movies with me as I'm preparing for the show. And reading this and realizing there was no Mr. Winky, I was like, I'm gonna have to break to Doug that there is no Mr. Winky in this book, because he loves that character. And Cyril, the horse, as well. I was like, just waiting for them to show up, and they didn't. And I knew, I'm just sitting there waiting, and Doug's like, oh, so how does this compare to the book? And I was like, there's no Mr. Winky, there's no Cyril, and they are very...
There's no con plot.
Right, they are very important elements to the film. And I was like, they just made them up? Where did Cyril... I mean, I know Toad has a horse, but the horse doesn't speak or really do anything in the book. When he has his card, I was like... Cyril, this is very akin to Emily just appeared on Disney Coast to Coast to discuss Roger Rabbit. Y'all learned Judge Doom is not in the Roger Rabbit book. Where did Mr. Winky
Disney
come
made their
from?
own villain.
They really did. So that was my major difference.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing is they I feel like if they had gotten to do a full feature, it probably would have been similar to the animated version I keep referencing that I saw in 1995, or rather from 1995. But it feels like they took a lot of the heart that is in the story of the Wind in the Willows, and they sort of just saved that for the Winnie the Pooh later. But yeah, no, I see, I love them both equally, and I think it's actually kind of nice that we have this story that is inspired by, but also completely its own thing, because I love Cyril. Also, his name is Cyril Proudbottom, and that's just such a great name. Him and Toad, they are just a pair of old queens going to drag brunch on a weekend. That is that they are who you want to aspire to be. But yeah, no, I mean, there are those differences, but also I think one of the interesting moments is I don't think that the whole idea of Toad's next step being flight is all that far-fetched, because there is a moment in the book when the barge woman chucks Toad from the barge and he's sailing through the air, and he has this thought of what it would be like to be a toad bird. And I'm I can totally see someone returning to the book and taking that moment and was okay, we can justify him going to the plane because he has these thoughts as he's getting chucked off this barge. Just a wholly different story.
There's definite through lines. It reminds me of our experience reading Mary Poppins a few years ago. We were oh yeah, this was the chapter that inspired this. None of this was in the book. You can kind of picture if the story writer for this had a red pen and just started circling chapters in the table of contents to be yep, these are the beats we're going to cover. Forget that
they
whole
see the face
Pan
of God?
nymph. No, we're getting too
God
deep
out
there.
And they definitely focused on all of the Toad chapters. Like we said,
Yeah.
Mole is there. Mole does get the deed from Mr. Winky. He has a heroic moment. But yeah, those characters really get pared down, but Toad is our main character. So how do we feel that Toad compared in the Disney short to Graham's writing of Toad?
I did feel that was very close. Like reading through, I mean, yes, there were some illustrations in my book, but of course I'm picturing the Disney Mr. Toad as I read it. And personality wise, even though maybe some of the actions aren't identical, it's all there for me. So I felt it was a faithful depiction of that character, at least.
I would agree. It doesn't seem too much of a leap. It's pretty much the only thing that I'm just like personally missing is I just wanted a bigger washerwoman outfit, like in the illustrations that we get, where it's just like bustles for days and like a really kind of extravagant hat. And I just really enjoy seeing Toad operate around 50% of the story as a washerwoman. That just brings me so much joy in the book. But outside of that, they did the character justice. Outside of like making him truly a washerwoman for like 50% of the book or 50% of the short, that's fine. But they definitely captured the essence of him. The way that they do the mania in his eyes, that animation is just, that is so good. It is so good.
I agree that Toad is very much Toad. While he doesn't get that arc of learning a lesson, I think he's still very theatrical. He's very fun-loving. He bounces around in his ideas just as fast on screen as he does in the book, while also trying to persuade his friends that he's being responsible. But I do want to go back to what you said about the washerwoman, because that stood out to me so much that twice he brags about how good of a businesswoman he is, and that I wash laundry better than anyone. All the gentlemen in the Shire come to me because I starch a shirt better than anybody else. And then
they
he
call
gets
him on
challenged
it.
multiple times, like, oh, cool, since you can't pay me for this, do you mind doing some laundry while I drive you? And then twice. Doesn't learn from it twice.
No.
And the barge woman just calling him out. She's like, I knew you couldn't do it.
But I fully, like that, while he is not dressed as the washerwoman, like as extravagantly, because he still dresses in drag. But I definitely fully believe that the Toad in the movie, the Toad in the short, I almost want more scenes from him. Like I want to see him vindictively steal the horse and sell it, which is like the most like savage, iconic, like revenge move ever. And he like that, and like I want to see Disney's Toad doing more of the things from the book. Like I want the Disney version, but then I also want them to do it again and use that same Mr. Toad and give me every single scene that we get in the book.
So do you want a Disney live action remake of the Toad, of the Adventures of Mr. Toad?
Yeah, actually I would be down, only with the condition that either I get to voice one of the characters, or there is only one live human in the whole thing to play all of the humans, and that's me. Kind of like a Tom Hanks Polar Express sort of situation. Either one of those two options. Then we can do a live action.
I'm on board then. I also want Disney to make a plush of Mr. Toad in drag. Maybe that exists, and I will be looking on eBay later and maybe spending too much money, but he's so cute.
I forever regret when I was down in Disney this past Christmas time that I walked away without my Mr. Toad popcorn bucket.
What were you doing, Connor?
I didn't have the space in my bag, and I was like, no, I should have made the space. I didn't do that, and I didn't get the Mr. Toad mug.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. It's a really good sculpt of his face.
I'm just an idiot.
You have to support the Toad merch so that they make more Toad merch. And then I can get the plush of him in drag.
I know. So now I'm ruined. I have to go and buy one of those reseller people on eBay and give them my money. But yeah. I love Toad.
Well, I know we all love him, and we've discussed back and forth. I want to revisit one of our earlier questions now. along with the film, how do we feel that Graham's themes in The Wind in the Willows come through in the Adventures of Mr. Toad segment?
Well, Emily kind of touched on it. They really don't. Some of those larger themes of what this book is like really about, they don't really come through. Even I think Toad's lesson, like Toad's themes, they kind of come through about the progress. Like he's interested in progress. But I think that's where the Disney filter comes in too, because Walt is such a person who's in favor of progress. And this book is in many ways kind of, it's not fully anti-progress, but it's definitely not pro-progress. And I could see him being like, I don't want to necessarily align myself with someone who's, or align myself with the view of like, let's crap all over the person who's in love with progress. So I can definitely see how that sort of colors the view of it. But I would say largely, I don't see a lot of the themes, which at first thought would be pretty disappointing. And this the disappointment that I felt, I think, originally when I saw it. But when you finally are able to just like separate it and be like, okay, this is just a really, really good long form cartoon, then I think it's able to exist as something that you can take some things away from. They sort of like make every single character a more extreme like caricature of the characters. But yeah, no, the themes, I'm sorry, they're not there.
I don't think I have anything to add. You said it so well.
Yeah, just the themes that I touched on were home, and the only home that we really see in this is Toad Hall. We get, I would assume, is Rat's home in that what I would call Christmassy scene where Toad shows up from jail. Which, side note, how does he get out of the water? He still has the ball and chain attached to that. Has
one of the
plagued
most
us.
Haunting images
years.
Ever is the hand reaching out and then grabbing. That's
cuts,
a horrifying image.
And then he just shows up, and I could see if he showed up without the ball and chain attached to his ankle, like, okay, somehow he wiggled out of it. But I'm like, no, that ball and chain sunk him to the bottom of the river, but somehow
maybe he just remembered
out.
That he was an amphibian and that he could
breathe,
exist in water. Maybe that's what it was.
That's fair. So yeah, no really home or major themes that I saw. But as we said, I feel like the integrity is somewhat there. Maybe not as much as other movies and book adaptations, but it's a light version.
Well, then what do you think the message or the theme of the Disney version is then?
I don't know if I really picked up on a message. I think it's a lot more just like a fun short of here's a guy who steals a car but didn't really, because there's this whole aftermath backstory that comes back about how he gave this backhand deal, not really a backhand deal, but like sold it with a deed with Mr. Winky. I don't know, maybe the theme here is, like, be careful who your friends are. Like, he should have trusted Mole and Badger more so than giving this paper to a barman he just met on the first go round because he wanted this car so much that it got him in all this trouble and they turned on him. So maybe, know who your friends really are. But I struggled to really find a theme and a message in this one.
Yeah, I feel like if he got his comeuppance in some way, you'd of course call it a cautionary tale, but like, nope, he's flying off a plane into the sunset at the end of this, so not too much for the kiddos.
Who Framed Mr. Toad? This is a Who Framed Mr. Toad.
Can you imagine if Roger Rabbit and Mr. Toad met and like the chaos that would just ensue? That
would probably be hell.
Put like Mr. Toad on Cartoon Spin with Benny.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Everyone would just throw up. No, I think you're 100% right. Like if we're grabbing a theme from this, it's probably just a theme of friendship. But I also think it's very interesting how the whole introduction from Basil Rathbone is sort of framed of like thinking of the great figures in literature and things like that, where it seems like the short is almost more of like a character study rather than trying to make any sort of any sort of claim about him one way or another, but just sort of like, this is an interesting character. Look at all the wacky things he does. Okay, we're done. Bing Crosby, take over. Like, it just feels like that's more of what it is than trying to actually put a theme to it.
Would you have liked to seen this as a feature length? Connor, you said you watched a feature length animated film of this that came out in 1995. Courtney, you told us it was supposed to be a feature length, but we got the package film. Would we have liked to seen a feature length?
I don't think I need it as a feature length. Think it took all of the right beats, so I am curious to watch the one that Connor mentioned to see how it would be approached. But to me, because a lot of the chapters are somewhat standalone, the only way I think you could do it has already been done, and it's been done well by Winnie the Pooh, where you have the conceit of like it's a physical book and we go from page to page and chapter to chapter, because a lot of those, I think several of the parts of the feature, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, from the late 60s or maybe early 70s, those were already produced shorts and they stitched them together in a feature length. But I like that they use the framing of the book and them like jumping off the page or words coming into the page to stitch those chapters together. I don't know that it would have worked as well at double the runtime.
Side note, I would have loved to be in the room with the people who were doing Winnie the Pooh when they thought of that idea.
Genius.
Like, what a moment in history. Just so good. But yeah, no, see, I have such an attachment to this. It's on YouTube. I will send you all the link to this 1995 one. It did everything that I wanted it to do. It is so faithful to the book that I don't need Disney to do it either. In fact, I kind of don't want them to, in seeing how they polarized the characters so much, or rather took them to their very extremes. Like the snooty, like ratty in the short is not ratty, and like the almost stupid mole is like not the mole that we get in the book.
And the Scottish MacBadger.
Yeah, his name is not MacBadger. Like,
I did love they made him Scottish though.
What a choice. I mean, it's so good, but it's like that's not right. But if they were to like take those same characters and do Wind in the Willows faithfully with the characters that they already established, I wouldn't want that. That wouldn't feel right. So I think Disney, with the type of movies that they were making at that time, this is the best version that we would have gotten from them. And them to tackle a live action, or them to tackle a feature length version, even now, I feel like would almost be a waste for them. I just don't. It's one of those things where I'm like, I actually don't think Disney's the right people to do the story, and I think mostly because they've already done it with Winnie the Pooh.
I agree. I don't think we need a full-length feature. I think something I would like to see though is A.A. Milne's stage adaptation of Toad and Toad Hall that he pulled from the book, because I'd be curious to see how he condensed the book into a stage show, and maybe that could be something. But the beauty of stage is that you don't put it on screen. So I think I want to see the stage show more than I need to see another film.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see A.A. Milne's adaptation as well. And speaking of A.A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh, there are some layers here as we move into part 3 of this discussion. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride attraction. Connor, what have you prepared for us research-wise here?
All right, so I'll just quote my sources real quick. I mostly pulled from my own general knowledge, Yesterland, allears.net, and I did some Wikipedia for just some fast facts as well.
Hey, I tell my students, Wikipedia's fine.
Yeah.
As a starting point.
Yeah.
We did go other places.
Exactly. Go down to the footnotes and click on those
Verify
articles.
those sources.
Yeah, and make sure that they are showing a place. But Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is a Fantasyland dark ride inspired by the Wind in the Willows portion of Disney's animated film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. It began operation as part of opening day in Disneyland on July 17th, 1955, as the shortest ride in the park at 98 seconds long. It was a fairly simplistic ride and lacked a lot of the three-dimensional detail that we're used to, but the crazy antics of the track and the story made it a popular attraction early on. Rather than retell the story of the film, which is already a retelling of the story of the book, this attraction puts guests in the point of view of Mr. Toad in a brand new story. Guests would board a one-seater roadster and crash through the doors of Toad Hall, careening down hallways, under archways, into oncoming traffic, and down the riverbank past Ratty's house. The vehicles would then enter the English countryside, collide with a train, and then descend into literal hell, complete with devils and pitchforks, before returning to the queue area. In 1983, the ride was rebuilt in Disneyland's new Fantasyland, and now guests would enter a recreation of Toad Hall for the queue instead of the sort of festival tent from the original attraction. While the story of the ride remains similar, it was wholly updated to the quality of the dark rides that we're now accustomed to, adding more of the characters from the film, new scenes, and three-dimensional characters. A second, slightly different version of the ride opened in Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World as part of opening day on October 1st, 1971. This attraction featured two tracks that would give guests slightly different experiences depending upon which side they boarded. In addition, it allowed for some truly thrilling scenes where ride vehicles on either track would drive toward each other and barely miss as they swerve out of the way. This version of the attraction included more scenes and characters from the film and was considered a vast improvement on the attraction from its original form. In fact, some of the new scenes that were used in the Disneyland rebuild of the attraction in 1983 were scenes that were from the Walt Disney World version. In October of 1997, Disney issued a vague statement, neither confirming nor denying that the attraction was on the chopping block. Fans of the ride were outraged, and they would host peaceful Toad-ins wearing T-shirts to protest its possible closure. On October 27th, 1998, it was announced that the attraction would close only 12 days later on September 7th, 1998, to make way for the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Side note, I never got to ride this ride because I went in October of 1998. When we got there, my dad was literally like, "Where's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride?" It was just not there. He didn't even know what happened. Insane. Currently, there is only one operating iteration of the attraction, and that is in Disneyland, California. It remains a cult classic ride and a favorite among anyone looking to get out some road rage and go straight to hell.
Thank you so much for that lovely overview.
You're so welcome.
Let's share our thoughts and memories of the attraction. I know we got a little bit from you there, Connor, of your disappointment.
I have no memory of this attraction because I have never gotten a chance to ride it. And I've never been to California, which is weird, especially as an actor. So, but you best believe when I get myself out to Disneyland, I will be running. Everyone's going to be going to like Galaxy's Edge to do that. I will be running to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I will probably ride it as many times as I possibly can that day to make up for all the years that I've lost. But sadly, no memory of the attraction outside of riding it on YouTube.
I do have memories, vague memories of Walt Disney World's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I don't remember specific scenes, but I just remember being in the car, and I remember the facade, actually, the Fantasyland like tent facade that he had, because the two, we'll talk about the comparison of the two attractions of which one we think is better, but I do remember the facade a lot. But I did get to ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride last year when I visited Disneyland for the first time. So that is the one that's most fresh in my mind. I was that person. Courtney warned me. She said, you have to beeline for Fantasyland because once all the kids get there, the dark ride lines are going to be long. So I did all the dark rides immediately as soon as I got into Disneyland. And I took my partner, Caleb, and he has no background. I'm turning him slowly into a Disney adult. It's working. Courtney has seen the progress.
He's the Star Wars guy, right?
Yes, hardcore Star
Okay.
Wars guy.
All right. So
That was the gateway.
But
yeah.
but
It's
he
the gateway
knows
drug.
nothing about Mr. Toad. He knew nothing about this ride, and he's there purely to make me happy. He was a trooper, not a stormtrooper, but a
Bless
trooper.
him.
And he came off that ride and literally said, "What the hell?"
You're like, yeah, it's right there. It's at the end.
Yeah, we
He's
just
like, "This
passed
is the
it. Did
most-
you miss it?
This is the most like crazy. There's no through line. There's no story." He's like, I've got, and we'll talk about this, but
I have questions.
I had so much. He let me take the driver's seat with the wheel, and I won't lie, I descended into being like a 6-year-old, and I was like, the wheel does nothing to the track, but I was driving the car like I was on the crazy Mr. Toad ride. It was so much fun, even though it makes zero sense whatsoever what is happening in that ride. But it's just so much fun. I wish I remembered the Walt Disney World one more. Maybe while I'm here at my parents', I should go through the boxes of photos we have, because I'm sure there's pictures somewhere. But yeah, I just remember we're all going to talk about what it means to go to hell, and it is not a Mandela effect. It is a thing.
Oh, it's very much there.
But yeah, that's all I got. What about you, Court?
Well, I think I've alluded to in my other two sections, this is my strongest memory and attachment to Mr. Toad. You know, I will recognize the privilege of this, but my family visited annually because I have grandparents in Florida. So we visited annually between 92 and until I moved here in 2014. So I got
God bless the grandparents.
God bless the grandparents. I got like a solid, 5 or 6 years of getting to visit this, and I definitely enjoyed my Fantasyland rides being, I'm now 5'2", but I was a very small child. I was not tall enough to ride Space Mountain until I was 8 years old, and that thing's only like a 42-inch height requirement. So, woo, Fantasyland rides were where it was at for me for a long time there. So yeah, I remembered this one. I didn't want to touch on it because I knew we would get to it here, and I know we will get to a little about the hell thing, but I was always so curious about the Mr. Toad film, and as I said, I didn't really get to watch it as a kid, but I was like, do they go to hell in the movie? Like, what is happening at the end of this ride? And I still have questions, which again, we will muse on in a bit. But for me, the attraction, especially the Walt Disney World one, earliest memories, didn't go to Disneyland until I was older, but at that point, it had closed at Walt Disney World, so I was grateful to get to revisit at Disneyland, and as I advised to Connor, and Emily took my advice, if you are a Walt Disney World regular visitor going to Disneyland for the first time, my biggest advice to you, just side note, is to rope drop Fantasyland. Secure your Genie, your Lightning Lane for things like Space Mountain or whatever, but most of the Fantasyland rides do not have any sort of Lightning Lane Fast Pass type queue. Just go there first thing. Obviously, it's not going to be dead, but everybody is running to like Indiana Jones, Rise of the Resistance, Space Mountain. You can knock out Pinocchio, Snow White, Peter Pan. Alice
stuff.
is my favorite. We'll get to that next month.
I
and
virtually ridden that one.
Mr. Toad, Casey Jr. Circus Train. You can get all of those done with
Storybook Canal Boat.
Yep, walk on.
Which has Toad Hall in it.
90 minutes.
It does. I forgot about that.
That is my pro tip to all you Walt Disney World boys and girls going to Disneyland.
Especially because Fantasyland is probably in Disneyland is what none of those things exist in Walt Disney World.
Like we have Peter Pan. That's
it.
We have Peter Pan and we have Dumbo, and like that's it. Yeah. Everything else feels so new to you. They are just such delights. They are quintessential Disneyland to me. So I am glad that Mr. Toad's Wild Ride lives on in Disneyland.
Well, while we're talking about the attraction, how do we think this attraction that sends you straight to hell upholds the integrity of Kenneth Grahame's, pastoral English countryside story?
Not at all. That's what makes this so fun.
We were going to read the book, like, is it going to answer this question? No.
We're going to keep diving into this of how they condense the story, but no, there's no themes. The only thing that comes through is you are Toad with mania. And this is very much, I think, in the same realm of the Scary Adventure, Snow White's Scary Adventures, like way back where you were supposed to be Snow White, and that reading kind of came across weird to park guests because they were all looking for Snow White in the ride. Like, where's Snow White?
Peter Pan's flight, where they were like, originally Peter Pan wasn't in it at all, and they were like, "What's going on? Why isn't Peter Pan here?" It's like
you're Peter Pan. Yeah, but I think this is one that they didn't go back and make that change. That you are Toad. I don't remember if I
He's
saw
not.
Toad.
It's just the statues. But I think I watched the Yesterland one that Connor referenced, and I believe the host of that did kind of say that was a problem overall, but for Mr. Toad, for some reason, people got it, and his theory was because the ride vehicle is a car. You're like, I'm Mr. Toad, I'm driving the car, versus I'm riding in Sleepy's bed, like, through Snow White. Like, what is happening here? So yeah, you're right. They haven't added like a Mr. Toad animatronic. It's really just the representations of Toad that are already in Toad Hall because you are driving through Toad Hall.
That being said, though, the car is an exact replica of what is in the film. So that integrity is there. You've got the Mania, you got the car.
I think that's it.
I think the only other thing that I would end with is that if you wanted to extrapolate that there is some sort of spirituality that carries through, we do go to hell. And yes, that is not the same as like seeing the face of an animal god, but close.
So while we said the integrity is pretty much not there, how successfully would you say Imagineers work at translating this story to, at the time in its original form, a 98-second dark ride? I don't know if the length of time changed since the 1983, but yeah, you're only in there for about 2 minutes.
I mean, it's not the story. It's just the movie. And even some stuff in the dark ride is not even in the movie. Like, there's explosions. And I was like, nothing explodes in the movie. So I think they really just went for, like, you're going on a wild ride and buckle up or pull down your lap bar because you're in for it now.
Yeah, it almost seems like they kind of gathered the Imagineers and they were like, okay, you're going to be working on Haunted Mansion. You're going to be working on Pirates of the Caribbean. You're going to be working on that. And then they're like, oh, what do we do with these people?
Rolly Crump.
How about you do Mr. Toad's Wild Ride? And they're like, okay. And they just went and dropped acid. And then they were like, we're going to go to hell. And Disney's like, all right, fine. To the point where in the very, very first version of it, there like wasn't even cutouts of like Mole or Ratty or Badger. Like, it was very much not even like the film. So they had to add those elements back in by just like having characters and even like just playing the song. So yeah, I think they didn't necessarily do the best job in translating the film or the book into the attraction, but I also don't think that's what they were trying to do. I think they were like, we want anything that can justify just like whipping you around and like trying to break your neck with your children next to you.
Fair enough. So we've uncovered a lot of the history between these two attractions, and I know we didn't all get to experience both of them, but through the different ride-throughs that we've maybe watched or the research we've uncovered, there are differences between the Disneyland and Walt Disney World versions. Do you guys have an opinion on what you think the superior attraction was?
I think the best... Okay, I'm divided. I think the best track layout is Walt Disney World's. I think the conceit of having two different tracks and having like different experiences is always fun, and the ability to have guests like crashing into each other, that illusion is like really, really fun and really, really smart for this kind of ride. But the exterior of Toad Hall in Disneyland is just gorgeous. Like, it is beautiful. That, like, when I grow up and become like famous multi-million-dollar earning actor and I build my mansion will be Toad Hall. I will build Toad Hall. I will invite people and be like, come to the Perkins residence at Toad Hall. That is what I will have. And to see it like recreated, I think that was one of the best decisions that Disneyland made, is like tear down the festival crap that unfortunately Walt Disney World like kind of still has, and like let's just like really storybook this thing, and it's just like it's beautiful. So if we're going track, I think Walt Disney World has the best track. If we're going look design wise, I think Disneyland has the best version.
I 100% agree with you. I think that what makes Fantasyland and Disneyland so much more whimsical is that it doesn't look like a fair, which I don't hate that idea in Walt Disney World, but I think it could be done a little bit better. But I think it makes it less whimsical. It's a much more solid, cohesive theme, but that's what I thought made Fantasyland so much more fun, is all these different architectural styles for all these different dark rides next to each other, just kind of packed together. But I agree, the exterior. I would even argue the ride vehicle in Disneyland is a little bit better. Even though Disney World is a double row. Disneyland's is a single.
Oh, got it. I was like, they're both cars.
They're both
You're
cars.
not in a bed.
They have that same like heart shape, but Disney World's was a double seat. So from an operations point of view, better because it's moving the line more. You can fit a full family of 4 on it, whereas like my family would need 2 cars versus 1. But I think that lends your experience to be a little bit better being in a single car because you're the driver and the passenger. You're not in the back seat. Like I don't think I would have as much fun if I was in the back seat, even though it's not a ton of a back seat, but. So I think Bob Gurr's original design would be a little bit better for that part of the experience. But yeah, the track is better. The ability to crash. I think you nailed it, Connor.
I like 2 tracks. Space Mountain Walt Disney World, 2 tracks. Mr. Toad Walt Disney World, 2 tracks. Solely because I like the idea of families possibly thinking they're being gaslit when one of them goes on one track and the other goes on the other. And they're like, yeah, we went through Romani Camp. They're like, whoa, no, we went through a barnyard. And you're like, are you gaslighting me? Just the chaos that would ensue.
Those are like the most satisfying things ever.
So that's something that did make it out of the book into the attraction that wasn't in the film.
Gaslighting?
Was the camp. The camp when he sells the horse.
Yeah, that's true.
Now we're not selling a horse, but for someone who's not familiar with the story,
because watching the ride through, I was like, wait, that's not in the movie. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's probably why part of why it closed was some unfortunate caricatures.
They need to add the barge lady in.
Yes,
that would be super fun.
We're full.
And you get thrown out of your car.
Yeah,
by the barge lady.
Either that or like you. Maybe there's a section where like you crash into the barge or like you grab a horse and like a horse cutout sort of like goes with you, kind of like Tigger in Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and the barge lady is like, come back here. Like, I don't know.
It. Yeah,
I'm not an Imagineer.
And then in the gift shop, when you exit, you can buy the washerwoman costume.
Yes.
And the plush. Right. The plush. But both attractions end in hell. So look, we're at least consistent there for some reason.
Exactly. I love that of all of the things, that was the one thing I really like, we can't change that. They changed the queue but the one thing that has remained most consistent besides we're operating from Toad's point of view is you're going to end in hell, and then you're just going to be magically back.
It's time.
In the real world.
Let's do it.
So fun. Well, since the attraction infamously ends with guests going through hell, this scene, contrary to what you might expect, is not present in the animated short. Did you know that? Did you see any connection from the book to the final scene? Anyone?
So I won't lie. My biggest motivation for wanting to read this book for this podcast was to answer that question of why do we end this attraction in hell? Why?
Still don't know.
And
we'd be here all night if we're trying to answer that question.
I'm like both excited that it's still this Disney amalgamation of someone in Imagineering thought this was a good idea and no one knows why. But I was really hoping to find the answer, but no, nothing in the book whatsoever.
I wish Dave Smith was still alive so we could write to ask Dave and be like, Dave, why? Why did they do that to us?
Do you think someone from Dave's family would know? Do you think he would have told someone? Be like,
his deathbed.
Do we
come in close?
This is what's
in the will. Do we write the estate of Dave and say, Someone answer us. Why did we end in hell?
I tried looking it up. Did anyone find anything online? Everything I kept finding was like message boards of fans discussing it, but not an actual like, here's what Imagineers put together, like no actual history or transcript of the attraction.
I've never seen anyone say definitively what it is. There are some people who are like, the mania takes over and this is like the consequences of if the mania goes too far. Or then there's another thing of like, you get hit by the train and you die and everything explodes and then you go to hell. I don't think there's a single good read on what is going on.
Fair enough.
So if we were to go back to 1997, where would we all stand on the Toad-In at Walt Disney World?
I'm not doing
Do we save it?
No, I'd be sad, but look, I'm about to get like just sad here. I have lived in Florida since 2014, and in that time, I have lived through the closing of Maelstrom, Great Movie Ride, Ellen's Energy Adventure, the Backlot Studio Tour, Primeval World, Splash Mountain. Like, at this point, I've just accepted that attractions that are beloved can change, and for good reason. And you know what's new might be better, might not be in some cases. But I don't know that I would have protested in front of the attraction. I mean, for those of you who don't know, I don't know that we had like full context, but people made t-shirts and buttons and literally like had sit-ins or toad-ins in front of the attraction. So I think, I would have made sure when something's closing, I try to get like one last ride on. I don't tend to go on the last day. I don't need to be part of that chaos of like, oh, I'm on the very last ride. Like, I like to be like,
some toad spit.
Yeah, I
sell it.
I like to know, like, okay, you know what? This is my last time, and that's going to be a good memory. Like, I'll probably go like a week or so before, recognizing the luxury I have as a local for those different attractions. So each of them, except maybe Primeval Whirl, because I think that just like closed and that never came back. Like, yeah, that was its own thing. But otherwise, like, okay, I didn't go to Maelstrom on the last day, but I went a few days before. Same for everything else that I mentioned. Like, each time I went on, I knew that was going to be my last time, even if it wasn't the exact last day. So I think I would have approached it the same way. Now, having gone through very similar experiences, I would have been like, that's sad. Maybe Winnie the Pooh will be fun. It is. I don't know that I would have had a t-shirt. Now Disney will sell the t-shirt to you, as they do for, I remember like the Great Movie Ride closing and things like that, which, I think it's a nice way for fans to commemorate things like that.
Yeah, I see, like, I don't think I would be a part of the Toad-In because at that point in time, I wouldn't have experienced it. But if we're going like I am who I am now in 1998, having like grown up with it, I would probably be like pretty devastated because I'd probably be really, really attached to it. I would not spend thousands of dollars on tickets and planes and hotels to make my way down there and do a peaceful protest at a theme park where my protest is not going to change anything at all.
We're giving money to protest. Like, let's just break down the effectiveness of that.
And like, I kind of understand a little bit more where the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride Toad-Ins came from, because at that point, Disney really hadn't made up their mind either way. They were like, maybe this is happening. And so they were trying to be like, oh, we want to show that there's a lot of interest in it, so save it. As opposed to like what happened with Splash Mountain. They're like, we're closing it. And people are like, racism. But yeah, I wouldn't go to, no, I wouldn't do a Toad-In, because also, like, I do think two things. I do think that the Many of Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is a very, very valuable addition to the Magic Kingdom. And I am very, very glad that we have that ride. And I think that that is more valuable to most of the population visiting Walt Disney World, more so than Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And I also am a big proponent of having attractions that might only exist in certain Disney parks because it gives people incentive to visit other Disney parks. Like one of the reasons why I mostly want to go to Disneyland, one of the many reasons, but one of the reasons is I want to experience Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And I think that's special and I think that's cool. And I think that can happen. Even our Splash Mountain friends, like if you want to ride Splash Mountain, you can go. You just have to go overseas and you can still ride the ride that you're used to. Now we're going to have multiple versions of the ride, which having multiple versions, I don't think it hurts anybody.
I think I'm in the same boat. 1997, I was 5. I don't think it would have registered with me anyway. But if we were to have this now with the experiences and current events that we've seen with other closing attractions, I think I'm with you, Courtney. I'd make sure I want to try to get one last ride in. But I think today I would be more upset if, let's say, they want to close Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disneyland because it is the only surviving version and it's an original 1955 attraction. I think that would be a little bit more to me. I don't know if I would show up for a protest at it in Disneyland, especially living on the East Coast. Flights are very expensive. But I would have a little bit more, I think, at stake for that. Because I agree. I love the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh that we have with this extended queue that they redid a few years ago. I was friends with Pooh in the 100 Acre Wood over there. So I have some fond memories with
my heart.
With the 100 Acre Wood, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. But I do love that there are fans of this ride for a package film that probably most of those fans still haven't seen.
Yeah.
So that's going to close out our discussion of The Wind in the Willows. But because, Connor, you're our special guest, I have a question that has kind of been burning in my mind since we started talking. This is specific to you because of the 2 episodes you've been on with us. Ratigan versus Mr. Toad. Who wears a suit better? Who wears a monocle better? Who's the bigger queen?
Why do you do this to me?
Even if you want to concede that it's a tie, I kind of want your hot take on this of who's a more.
I feel like they're like the devil and the angel on my shoulder, and I don't even know if that's like really a good thing. And I don't even know which one's the devil and which one's the angel.
The devil and the other devil.
The devil and the other devil. Oh my! Who wears a monocle better? Okay, I can answer that. I think Toad wears the monocle better. I think partly because of the structure of his head and the way his eyes. Who wears a suit better? Obviously, it's Ratigan. He's got a cape. He's got a cape. He's got the ascot, the top hat, the little cane. Like he's got the works. But I do love the colors of Toad's outfit. Toad has the better house, but Ratigan has the pink wine fountain.
Toad would have one. As soon as he would see Ratigan's wine fountain, that would be his new mania. He'd be like, I mean, gotta get a wine fountain.
I could totally see, no pun intended, Toad Hall becoming like a haven for all of like the old bitter queens of Disney films. So like Ratigan would like crash there. Cyril Proudbottom would be there. Mr. Toad would be there. Maybe Jafar shows up for like an afternoon tea one day. Mr. Smee, yeah, Captain Hook, just like all there
Prince
for a
John,
good time.
For sure. Robin Hood, Prince John. We're not leaving him out.
Oh, absolutely. And Sir Hiss, absolutely. So I will not, you cannot make me choose between them. I refuse to answer that question, but there are some things that either of them do better. But even if we're going on characters that have like done things the best, if Ratigan's number 1, then Mr. Toad is number 2. And if Mr. Toad is number 1, then Ratigan's number 2. Like they're just perfect. They're perfect.
They are both perfect. And you were the perfect guest for us today.
I'm so honored. So when you were like, we're talking about The Wind in the Willows, I was like, heck yes, this is exactly what I want.
Well, as we like to wrap up, we like to leave some resources for our listeners. So we've each picked a few here. And my fun fact is that the Save Mr. Toad's Wild Ride website still exists in all of its 1997 geosite glory. So that will be linked in the show notes. It has addresses for Michael Eisner and Marty Sklar, R.I.P., and links where you could have bought the t-shirt and the button. It says that they are no longer in stock. But if you want to be like, what was the internet like in 1997? That will remind you real quick. And I just love that it's still hosted on a University of Miami domain. So shout out to those Toadins not losing hope. Connor, what do you have for us?
Oh, I just put in my sources for where I grabbed the stuff, which was Yesterland and allears.net. I particularly love looking at stuff on Yesterland. They do a really, really nice job of just like archiving like finding really, really good pictures and things like that of what things looked like. Like they have the picture of Walt and Lillian riding Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Fun fact, they were in the Winky automobile, and I was like, wow, what does that say? Like, that's what, but yeah, no, I would say go there and learn more about Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
I'm going to point to my sources as well, and my history teacher hat is going to go on and encourage you to check out some primary sources. So if you go online to the Bodleian Library exhibit where he bequeathed his royalties, where his wife then donated the letters, you can read those letters that Kenneth Grahame wrote to his son Alistair with those original stories of Toad. And I did read a couple of them, and it was very sweet to see how he told these stories in his own voice to his son, and then how that translates into the book and seeing that evolution of the story. So encourage people to check that out.
All fun things, which we will link in the show notes. And exciting news that next month we will be joined by the other half of Poor Unfortunate podcast, Caroline Ameti. She will join us for a discussion of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. We were inspired to include her after her passionate take on the film in their Rabbit Hole Rant and Rave episode earlier this year. So if you want a little taste or preview, be sure to check that out from Poor Unfortunate podcast. But I'm sure we'll get some more thoughts as we bring her on for our July selection. In the meantime, you can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. Email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please leave us a review so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me, Courtney, on Instagram at GreatGutsby and on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at Emily_McD. And Connor, where can our listeners keep up with you and the Poor Unfortunate podcast?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Conor Perkins, and that's CONOR. And you can find Poor Unfortunate Podcast on your favorite podcast app, PoorUnfortunatePodcast.com, on Twitter at UnfortunatePod, and on Facebook and Instagram at Poor Unfortunate Podcast.
Wonderful. And as our guest, you know the drill. What quote have you selected for us today?
All right. I'm very excited for this. I'm not going to sing a song like I did last time, but I'm going to take this quote, which is from the preface of my father's 1959 Scribner's edition of Wind in the Willows that was written by Francis Clark Sayers of UCLA. Apologies that this is kind of more of a passage and not a quote, so it's a little bit longer, but I feel like it really articulated my own experience of finding the Wind in the Willows in many of its forms in my youth. So here we go. The edge of pleasure can easily be dulled by a too early expectancy on the part of parents or other adults in waiting. The Wind in the Willows has no doubt suffered, as has many a trip to the circus or the zoo, by being thrust upon the child before he was ready to absorb the wonder. It is a book worth being given time and patience. But what a book to come upon by accident, to discover for oneself. Lucky the child who does discover it in the family bookcase. Most fortunate of all, the child who grows up in a household where the Wind in the Willows has become, even before his entry into the world, a part of the folklore of the family, where spring cleaning is accomplished with the help of Mole's incantation of bother and onion sauce, and toadish traits are, from time to time, a matter of illusion. For to be born into the commonwealth of the wind and the willows, to know it by hearsay before sight makes it recognizable, to have it as one's own peculiar heritage, this is to be born not only with a silver spoon in the mouth, but under a galaxy of lucky stars.
Well, that is the perfect quote, and you were, of course, our perfect guest to have here. So thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This is such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, and tally-ho!
The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.